Kiersten, thanks so much for coming back on here with me to do the second part.
Thank you for asking me. I had a blast the first time, and I'm excited to be back.
I know. I'm really excited to have you for this second one because it just, I mean, I feel like this with like a lot of my podcasts, but I'm like, there's so much more than just like an hour I can get out of somebody.
Yeah.
And usually when you talk to people, like the people that you're talking to, if you can only get an hour out of them, like in your interest of them, like that's difficult. Like, I don't know if that's the person I should be talking to.
I totally understand.
I know,
I
but
felt like I could talk to you for hours.
I know
about all of this stuff. So
that's how I feel so much with all my guests. But all right, so we're going to walk into, if you haven't listened to the episode before, I highly recommend it because I really am going to just launch into this one.
perfect.
And okay. So what we're going to move into is having your own kids and, you being highly intuitive as yourself. How old were your kids when you started walking into realizing your intuition? I know they were school age.
Yeah,
But
they were around 10 and 6 at the time that I was starting to come into my intuition and my intuitive gifts as a medium. So they were still babies. And, I noticed a few times that they would notice what I was noticing. So it actually, just even watching them helped validate that I wasn't losing my mind. So I highly recommend having children if you go through a late in life mediumship experience. So they helped me a lot.
Can you get are some examples of?
So I remember one time Noah, her name's Natalie now. Our daughter is transgender, but back when she was Noah at 10, we were sitting in the living room, and I remember both of us seeing the same figure walk across the living room, and both of our heads did this. So I knew at that point I couldn't be the only crazy one, that he was seeing something as well. And then a little bit later on, as I was already channeling, our daughter Grace, who was, I think, probably 8 at the time, would say, "Mom, there's a little boy in the kitchen and he has a red hat on." And I would say, "Yes, his name is Jacob, and I just spoke with him." And so I would validate that she wasn't crazy, that she was actually seeing it. But they grew up with me kind of growing into this. And so I think the beautiful part is they grew up knowing that intuition is real. And as I learned that myself.
Well, and I think also too, what I always try to really preface on this podcast is that the more work and stuff that you do on yourself as a parent, or whatever's going on with you as a parent, like there is an absorption rate from your kids.
Yes.
That sure, there are other ways in which your kid comes in more highly intuitive, and then that knocks you into something. But the idea that you are so intuitively connected, like there's no escaping it.
No, there was no escaping it. Those poor things, like even if they didn't want any of this in their life, there was no escaping it. But I will say that I remember before I came into my intuition, and I didn't even realize that, intuition was a real thing, Noah would say things that were very much old soul, very much wise beyond his years. And, we already sort of had a sense that he was sort of teaching us, that was really kind of our intuitive sense about Noah. And now as Natalie, it's even more clear that she is here to teach us and to teach a lot of people about, love and compassion and in life.
So we actually probably should iron this out so people know what's so you have a daughter. So how old are your kids now? Sure. And you have 2 kids. And so yes. How old are they now? And we'll talk about.
So I have 2 kids. Natalie, who is our transgender daughter, was Noah prior to becoming Natalie this year, and she's 22. And then Grace is just turned 18. And she just voted, which is really cool. So yeah, it's exciting that they're both, I can't believe that they're as old as they are, because it feels like yesterday they were very tiny, but they are definitely forces to be reckoned with and just amazing, awesome people.
So when they were younger too, with everything, did you, here's something for you.
Okay.
When when like all your stuff started to go on with like your own intuition kicking up,
Mm-hmm.
did you sometimes I felt like with there was my own guilt, even though my kids were going through more stuff than I was,
Mm-hmm.
that I know different now, but that I was perpetuating a problem. And
Oh.
not a problem, but
Mm-hmm.
like it's
Mm-hmm.
extreme to have your intuition open up
Yes.
and
Yeah.
for people for them to understand better your psychic ability
Mm-hmm.
or and any of that. It's more than that energy flowing through.
Right.
It can be painful and overwhelming, and um you know me being there and being supportive, but there was also like no escape.
Right. No, there was no escape. And I remember feeling, well, I was scared to death. I was overwhelmed. I was 36. I'm 47 now, so it's been 11 years. But I was terrified, and I didn't want to talk about what was happening to me publicly. I didn't want it to hurt my business. It was much easier to be the woman who won Shark Tank, a deal on Shark Tank, than it was to talk about this stuff. And I know they could feel that as well. I think they felt what I was going through and how divided I was. Because until I really got a lot of validation, I wasn't sure what was happening. And as much as I wanted to believe it was real, it was still really, really difficult. And there was no escape from that. And then on top of that, you're still, I still tried to be that mom that I was prior to all of this stuff happening, but it's such a life-changing thing. How can you still be the same person? You can't.
Yeah,
So I was trying to juggle all of that.
I found it interesting. I think I've talked about this before on the podcast, that they literally would reference the old me as a completely different
Wow.
a completely different person, like old you or who you were before, or I don't know. If they could have given her a name, they probably would have, but
Right. Right.
and then what I found interesting was like a year ago for us is that they forgot her, and they
Oh.
never they'd have no memory of her anymore.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Like I'd be like they'll ask me things. I was like, I wasn't a very, I didn't listen, or like I spanked you, all of these things. No, like I have no memory of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
That's amazing. Wow.
yeah, which is
Yeah.
interesting.
It is interesting. No, and I can relate to that. My memory is also, I have a tough time with memories. And sometimes I will have to reach out to other people to say, what happened? What was going on at this point? Because I have no memory of this at all. Or our kids will say, don't you remember when this happened? So I can relate to you on that.
Yeah.
I think that I was more so, I felt a lot of guilt because I had a lot of children in spirit, and that's who mostly I channel, coming to me for help and to pass messages. And I had to get to the point where I knew that, I was devoting time to them, but also, I'm here as the mom of my two amazing kids, and I needed to be there for them. And there were times when I know I wasn't. I was pulled so much in this other world because it was so new to me, and I felt that I had to, that I guarantee there were times when, I should have been going to the park with them, and instead I was channeling.
Yeah.
So I had to find that balance.
Did did you ever have with your own kids the the interaction with, well, because you are channeling other spirits of other children, where they're interacting with your kids and there comes a point where you're like, that's too much,
Yeah.
like boundaries?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. There was a time, and I actually put this is in my upcoming book called Little Voices, but there was a moment where one of the children that I was helping, she was murdered, and she had come to me, had not crossed over yet. And I could feel her around me all the time. And I welcomed that because I felt like, well, her soul needs this sort of comfort. And if I can be that, I will. What she didn't realize, though, is that then after a little while, she was around the same age that Grace was. She was 8 at the time. Grace was 8. That she passed away, that she was kidnapped and murdered. And she sort of attached herself to Grace. So all of a sudden, we saw a completely different Grace. Grace went from being this fearless kid that would run down the street, Mom, I'm going to my friends, and just completely, just no fear, to can you walk me down the street? I'm really scared. I don't want, and it took me a while. I actually had to get another professional medium involved to say, something's going on with Grace. And I don't think this is some sort of some sort of child development
Yeah.
milestone. We're looking at something very different. And she was the one to say, oh, this little girl has sort of attached herself. And this was prior to her crossing into the light. So she did eventually cross into the light, and she felt comfortable doing that. But we saw a complete change once we explained it to her and said to the little girl in spirit, honey, you can't attach yourself to Grace. I know you don't know what's happening, but this is making her really fearful, of being away from her mom. And it was amazing. She felt really badly, so badly that at one point we had taken the kids to a restaurant, and there was one of those claw machines, that you put like your kids' college, fortune tuition into, and you get nothing out of.
Yep.
Well, that was pretty much what we were used to. And Grace loved this game. So we gave her some money, and she goes over to and this was right after we figured this thing out with the little girl in spirit. And she went over and she won bear after bear after bear. Like, she couldn't stop winning, to the point where the entire restaurant was cheering her on. And all of the people who own this pizzeria were coming over and saying, this girl needs to go to Vegas. Like, what in the world? And then I kind of started laughing, and I thought, she's getting a little help from the other side
Yeah.
on this one. Yeah. But she was completely different after that, after we established those boundaries. But those are things that I didn't know. I didn't even know how to help Grace. And I had to get other people involved.
One of the other things I was wondering is that, did your kids ever confront you, with everything, with your intuition, stuff like that? I know we as parents try and hide them or hide what's going on. So people who don't believe in that stuff, or so they won't get looked at oddly, or, they're people ask questions, which is fine, but they don't necessarily ask their questions from a genuine place.
Yes. Yeah.
Did you ever have either that, or your kids confront you and be like, I'm upset with you about this, or not upset with you about this, or?
I think that, it took them a while too, because they weren't around. It wasn't like I hung out with a bunch of mediums or spiritual
Yeah.
people. I was not in that circle at all. I had loving people around me who are awesome. And, I know they have their own intuitive gifts, but it was nothing we've ever talked about. Our talks consisted of, what are you going to get when you go to Target? It's just very, very much what, a normal family talks about. But I do remember a couple times that they did come to me, and they would say, is this really real? Are you sure? Maybe you're just dreaming it. And, there was also probably at times when I wasn't fully present with them either, so they were feeling that. And I honestly, I'm sure I know Nat believes, based on the validation that I received and based on the cops that I've worked with and their testimonials and whatnot. But I don't, I'm not really sure if Nat buys into all of it now, and that's okay.
Yeah. I think that's very normal. I think that's super normal. Like, how, like, people with anything, somebody told me once, they're like, if you ever write a book, be prepared for everyone not to read it.
Yes.
Like, you almost get surrounded by people who, thank God, just either don't show any interest or look at you so normally, because if it was another way in which they didn't, or they were obsessed with what you did or whatever, then that would affect it negatively.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and once I've gotten a lot of questions, and I have had a lot of naysayers and a lot of people asking me to prove it. Right. There's this expectation that I would, guess the lottery numbers or something like that. It's all of that stuff. I've had a lot of that personally come to me. My kids didn't come to me with that. They just sort of questioned, why is it happening to you? And of course, it took me a while to figure out why it was happening to me. And that was, thankfully, they were older when that happened. It's been an interesting ride.
So I'm going to move lanes, which
Okay.
I we were going to talk more about raising children and something that's more in the wheelhouse of the title and, tagline of this podcast. But this is something that I feel super important that we talk about. And I would like to talk about your daughter, Nat, and her being transgender.
Mm-hmm.
And first thing I would like to say is I'm going to use all the wrong pronouns probably, and I'm going to screw up. And I would like you to I would like you to correct me.
Okay.
And I would love to have conversation about that. And I want to say up front for anybody who is listening, who is in this position, that I am learning and I am open, and this is like a place I need to be. So us having this conversation is so it can help other people have this conversation. I know that discussing things with transgender sexuality, and it's bigger than sexuality,
Right.
is difficult for people.
Mm-hmm.
And right now we're in this transition, so nobody knows what the right thing to say is. And that's where I want to be. That's what I want to do. And I want to talk about parenting in this situation, because I've run into actually several situations where we have highly intuitive kids who are trans, and then also to have run into situations where I've met people who have worked in that world as psychologists, and this is important for me to discuss. Let's just put it that way.
Well, thank you, seriously, thank you for even wanting to talk about it, because I know it is a subject that scares a lot of people, and I really appreciate you even saying, correct me, I'm not going to use the right pronouns. I'm not either. That's the thing. Nat just picked her name about 4 months. No, it's not even 4 months ago, 2 months ago. And so after 22 years of calling your child one name, it's difficult. So even I'm like, Noah, Nat, I'm sorry. Oh, and she goes by she. So I am, obviously changing pronouns, and that's what she wants to do. So, but I'm doing the same thing, and she thankfully gives us a lot of grace around it.
Good. I'm glad
Yeah.
that you're in a position, because I've talked to plenty of people where the home isn't open enough to have these discussions. And, so I'm glad that is occurring. So so let's just start
Yeah.
from the beginning.
Sure.
We can either talk about at the point that Nat started to really want to discuss being trans. Is that, once again,
Yeah.
is it
No,
being
that's a great
trans?
way to say it. Yeah, that's a great way to say it, from what I know. And I don't know everything, but
Right.
that's a great way to say that.
Or where you started noticing that we're going to be taking a different path with this kid than,
Okay.
you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
So yeah, absolutely. So what's really interesting about it is when Nat was young and growing up, she was highly sensitive. We knew that from the very, very beginning. As a kindergartner, I'm looking up the highly sensitive child in the book, and basically, running through the tests, and everything was absolutely spot on. So I knew that she was very, very sensitive as a little kid. And that continued to the point where she dealt with a lot of anxiety and depression. And I know some of that is DNA, some of that runs in the family. I think some of that has to do, now that I know that she has been dealing with gender dysphoria for all of this time since she was 10 and she's 22, then I know that contributes as well. But I also think there's a piece of the highly sensitive also. And so I think it was around, you know what? Honestly, it was probably shortly before she came to me and came to us and said, I think I'm dealing with gender dysphoria. So maybe a month or so prior. And what was interesting is I was getting cues from Spirit. So I'm watching television. I'm seeing a segment on this amazing transgender woman who was talking about how her anxiety got so much better once she finally, was able to be who she was born to be. And I had chills up and down. And I thought, yeah, what an amazing story. I'm just passing it off as chills. I wasn't associating it with Noah, at the time. So
Yeah.
that was really, it was kind of an interesting thing, because I felt like I was getting clued in, but I couldn't see it until afterwards. So we just truly just felt we didn't really understand. I didn't know what dysphoria meant. I had to
I
look it
was
up.
just about to ask you. I was like,
Yeah.
well, euphoria means,
Yes. Yes.
like extreme happiness. So dysphoria would be the opposite, I'm guessing.
Yeah. It is the opposite. So basically what she was explaining to us, and my husband Scott and I had to ask, like,
Yeah.
honey, okay, all right, we are here, we are supporting you. Can you tell us what that means? And so she said, you know what, it means that I was born into the wrong body. I'm in the wrong body. Dysphoria brings a lot of depression. It brings, you're looking at your arm and you have, a lot of maybe masculine hair and you're wanting to be female. And then that creates a lot of depression. So dysphoria can relate to even just specific parts and looking at yourself, or just in general overall, the feeling of just not being in the right body. So that is what the diagnoses, I guess, would be called. That's what they use for the term.
So I don't know if this question is necessarily jumping ahead then.
That's okay.
Knowing knowing what you know, but having your own belief systems, right?
Mhm.
And I would assume that they're kind of in line with things that I believe, like I chose the body that I'm going to be in. I
Yeah.
chose the traumas that I'm dealing with. I chose the children. And, you know,
Mhm.
have you ever had that conversation with Nat about that?
We've talked
Yeah.
about it. I even recently, I find myself in conversations with people a lot where they're asking, once they find out we have a transgender daughter, they're asking a lot of questions. Well, how does that feel? And,
Yeah.
they'll say he going to go to hell because of this,
Oh,
all of those
Jesus.
things are wrapped up, I know, in the ideologies and these beliefs that they don't really know anything about.
Right.
So we've had that conversation, and I've pretty much, thank God she lived through all of this with me, right from the intuition side. And I said, babe, like, this is honestly, I'm just so happy because I finally feel like you're going to find your happy. It's been a lot of
Yeah.
years. And I see that around you. I see even just more light in her face. I see more light around her. I also told her, as we were having the conversation, I said, this is a path that a soul picks, that has been around a long time. This is a really elevated path. And that
Yeah.
path, from what I can tell, teaches self-love and compassion and all of these things that we're here on earth to learn and do. And just by, it was the bravest thing. I don't think I would never have been that brave at 22. I thought it was brave moving out of the town that I grew up in, but she's changing genders. That's like the biggest thing that she's ever going to do. And it's such a brave thing to do. And so we talked a lot about that. And I think she feels like, yay, thanks mom for supporting me, and saying that this isn't some evil thing, and this
Yeah.
is actually a really good thing. But also she's dealing with gender dysphoria, which is really a tough thing to deal with. So it's kind of an interesting balance that she has on both sides, because she hears both.
I I've thought about this a lot, actually,
Mhm.
years and years of this. When I think it was because of Conversations with God, I think, that
Yeah.
book. But it just kind of like, okay, why would somebody come into this life? Like, what are they trying to heal or find out about themselves doing whatever? Let's just say like an abused woman, or a child with leukemia, and it doesn't have to necessarily be, it doesn't. I hate trying to use examples, and the only thing I can really come up with has like a negative connotation.
Oh, that's okay. I understand. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
you
Mm-hmm.
know it
Mm-hmm.
it's difficult, it's all very complex. But so with trans
Mm-hmm.
children, I like sit there and I'm like, okay, so why would you want to come in? And I meditated a lot on it, just trying to figure it out and understand. And just the only thing I ever got, not only thing I've ever gotten, is that it's just this elevated sense of evolution, right? This huge, like they're ahead of us,
Mm-hmm.
that humans and souls and stuff like that, like we really don't have a gender.
Right. Exactly.
This is like an evolutionary thing where eventually it will be null and void, and
Mm-hmm.
we'll be.
Right.
you know? And I mean, I assume, that's what I ever got, that it was just like this actual depiction. They are the actual depiction of like the human race being like unconditionally fluid and loving and not set in a box, right? Like you're actually so much bigger than all of this.
Yeah.
And you're so much bigger than your sexuality, your race, your gender, your economic class. Like it's literally the picture of us not morphing into one another, but like realizing the connection is like that much bigger.
I love that you say that, because that's exactly what I have also heard. Whether it's from spirit, whether it's from my own higher self, I've absolutely heard that exact same thing. And that they're such leaders. Like I can't even imagine, pushing us forward
Yeah.
to understand all of this. And to a society, like you said, where we're much more fluid and we really are genderless. It's an incredible feat. And so I'm really grateful that she picked me to be her mom, because so much of this I didn't really think about. I didn't know. I've learned so much just in kind of walking with her on this journey, and I don't know everything, but I do know that all of the folks who are on this trans journey are really making such huge strides in humanity. They're really
Yeah.
helping us so much.
A huge stride in humanity. I didn't know. I went on a writing retreat once,
Mhm.
and I had the privilege of meeting a psychologist who her specific work was working with trans youth.
Oh, okay.
And I got schooled so bad on stuff I had no idea about. And one of the most like soul rocking things was like the percentage of how many of these kids are put up into foster care.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And like the percentage of it happening was like more so than people actually maintain, keeping their children.
Right. Oh,
And like that blew my mind that there is a huge segment in foster care
mhm.
for these children because and I'm sitting there and I'm going like I don't even know how to process that.
I know. I don't either. And honestly, I only have heard that one time and had even forgotten about it until you mentioned it now. But I can tell you from my experience and just talking with Nat, a lot of her, trans peers across the nation, even some are international, because thank goodness for technology, right?
Yeah.
Are living a very different experience
Yes.
through all of this, and they're not able to get hormones that they want. Their parents have kicked them out.
Yep.
It's just heartbreaking to hear that, here are these kids who actually came in as such evolved souls, are going through this on top of all of that. Just
Yeah.
heartbreaking.
And to not have the support. And also too is that a lot of these kids are coming to their parents
Yeah.
quite young, like
Yes.
3,
Yes.
4, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we have parents giving up children at 5, 6.
Right. Oh, I
And
know.
like even I'm getting like choked up just even thinking about it.
Mhm.
And the other thing too is there's I'm not sure if you've had to go through this or not, but maybe you have, um to decide to go to have, we're going to go with trans surgery or
Yes.
and like
Mm-hmm.
the situation with hormones and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that is, the earlier the better,
Right. Right.
for the ease of it, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And you have little ones who are like really truly being like, no, seriously, I'm not
Right.
even joking you right now, like I am willing to take those needles and do that. And like,
Mhm.
and as a parent, what was hard for me to hear was, you know that a lot of these parents, they're putting their kids in with psychologists but not going themselves.
Oh, right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that happens quite a bit from what I understand
I mean,
too.
that I think that's common. And like, if I could walk around all day long with a freaking poster board, is like, if you want to put your kids in therapy, good for you. You have to go too. Like,
Exactly.
there's
Exactly.
no going one or the other.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Completely agree. And Nat is seeing a psychologist and a psychiatrist. And it's been interesting too, because we've learned, as parents, we've learned so much from
Yeah.
both. And what is incredibly heartbreaking, like you're talking about with these young kids, I think had Nat figured it out at 10, obviously she had been feeling this for many, many, many years, 10
Yeah.
years prior to coming to us, because she's been transitioning for about a year and a half now. She would have absolutely wanted to start hormones early, and I would have absolutely said yes, because that's what she needed. That's her soul path, and that's what she needed. And I know it's a difficult decision as a parent, especially in this society, and this is all seemingly kind of so new to
Right.
many of the parents. But these kids know, they know, and I've had people say to me, well, my kid liked to act like a dog when he was 5, and he would go around at, so what's the difference between that? I'm like, oh gosh,
It's
okay.
different.
It's different. It's
It's
so
different. It's so stinking different. It's not even funny.
yeah. And so many of these kids will tell you, and their parents will tell you, and of course, this is something we worried about too. We saw never-ending depression with Nat,
Yeah.
never-ending depression. And, so many of these kids will contemplate suicide. I mean, why not, right? Like, they're not able to be who they are. Their parents aren't supporting them. They're not getting what they need. Why be here? And that was what scared us to death, because that's the alternative for so many of these kids,
Yes.
and for
Yes. Look at
for
the
everyone
suicide
else.
rates.
Yeah, exactly. It is horrifying.
And on suicide rates, that is another thing that irritates the crap out of me, is because you can say, look at the suicide rates,
Mm-hmm.
try and find the suicide rates. It's like trying to walk through a labyrinth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's there. Like,
It is
there's
there.
people who are dedicated to finding it and supplying it, but it's there.
Right.
With you know, too, with, I don't know if you went far into doing this or not, because it's different as a parent, right? Like, there's a closeness that you will always have with your children, but there's also a degree of closeness your children will let you get,
Yes.
but
Yes.
they'll let somebody else get closer, which is fine. It's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
just how things work.
Absolutely.
But I know that there's a spiritual component too, I think, with children that have that early depression. I'm not saying it's right, wrong, or indifferent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if Nat's not processing it in the physical, in the front, in the
Right.
conscious, right?
Right.
There
Right.
is a processing that happens in the unconscious and the spiritual,
Yes.
and the working through, and how are we going to get through this, and what are we going to do,
Mm-hmm.
even if she's, not thinking about it in the
Absolutely.
conscious.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know, there, and she, you need all the, the other thing too is, like, you need all your tools
Right.
from being little,
Mm-hmm.
and tools and learning from the life as a, for in her case, as a male.
Right. Right.
Like, you need to have the juxtaposition,
Yes. Yeah.
you know. Does that
Mm-hmm.
mean that didn't suck? Absolutely not.
Right. Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
that was,
it was interesting, because I remember asking Nat when we were talking about all of this, and when she was finally coming to the realization that she's just in the wrong body. And I said, do you remember recognizing, like, is there anything that you can remember back to your childhood? And she said, you know what, huge video game lover, big into anime, an amazing illustrator, like she's just beyond talented. So she would play video games with her friends, and she would always choose to be the female. And she said that she, as she's in the preteen, teen time period, she would try and convince herself that it was because, oh, that girl has a hot bod, kind of thing, like how a male would have to see a female. But in actuality, she wanted to be that female. So there were little things that she recognized after the fact, I think, and,
yeah.
and subconsciously as well, and could pinpoint and talk about it after the fact.
When she came to you, like was it like a climax of sorts, or was it a just walking down to breakfast one morning, or
It was not a climax at all. And again, we had been trying to help her in every way possible with the anxiety and the depression, had tried everything. Medication, Reiki, spiritual healers, energy work, like you name it. And we weren't seeing a huge difference. You know, it was
yeah.
actually, I could see that it was actually getting worse. And one day, right before dinner, Scott and I were cooking dinner, and she walked up and said, "Mom, Dad, I think I'm dealing with gender dysphoria." And I went, Okay, okay, okay. I love you. I support you. Can you please, like, can you explain that? I'm sorry, I don't know what that is. Like, I don't exactly." And if she would have said trans, I probably would have understood, but I didn't know the terminology at the time. So she said, "Well, I feel like I'm in the wrong body. I feel like I'm supposed to be a girl. That my, that's who I am." So we had a long discussion, and it absolutely shocked Scott and I. We had those reactions that you do as parents. It's sort of like everything kind of goes into slow motion for a minute. And yeah, we had to process it as parents, because there's a bit of grief, right? Like,
Yeah.
once we had that discussion and we said, we love you so much, whether you're Noah or Nat or whoever you are, we want you to be happy and we support you wholeheartedly. Privately, we did have to kind of, grieve a little bit, because it's tough to take that in after you've known that person for 21 years. As you have a relationship as a mom, right? Yeah, you like the mother-son relationship. The irony, though, is that was what my initial thoughts were, and Scott too. But we have the same relationship. We
Yeah.
have the same closeness. And hopefully we're even closer now, because she's finally being able to be truly who she is. I just dyed her hair the other day because she wanted it dyed red, and she's growing it long. And I mean, how cool is that? I love doing that. It was really fun. And it was something that we would have done, had she been Noah too. But I had to get over that piece of it and understand that actually it's only gotten better, because she is finally who she is meant to be.
So there was a spiritual death, essentially. I mean, you
Yeah.
get it. You
Yeah.
get it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it happens to all of us all the time for different reasons, right? Like you even see it with like when you realize like your kid isn't a kid anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I
Mhm.
mean? There's a grieving that happens. I'm getting
Absolutely.
choked up because I'm guessing that's going to happen to me soon.
I know. I'm sorry. Yeah. And we still have that just in general. We look at old
Yeah.
pictures of our kids when they were really little, and we're at the zoo, and, they're, and we just look at at each other, and it's really not even about gender anymore. I'm not looking at her like, oh, look at, Noah was Noah then. It's more like, they grew up. How did that happen? That
Yeah.
happened so quickly. And wow, like, I wish, people always say you wish you would have paid more attention and held on harder, right? And that's really
Yeah.
difficult when they're little, because it's such a different type of hard as a parent. But yeah, we still have those moments where we look back and go, "Oh my God, how did this happen? They're old now. How did that happen?"
Well, and I think, with as a parent, there's a spiritual death.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it happens when your kid's 30 or 40 or
Yeah.
50, when who you had created or belief system of who they were or are, and
Mm-hmm.
then they show you more of who they feel that they actually are, and you have to release that other piece.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know it so much too much because my kids are littler, but I know
Right.
it's so much as being the kid that you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, you have these expectations, right?
Right.
And I know that that's normal as a parent, to have an expectation of who your kids are going to be and who they
Yeah.
are. And even in terms of just small things, like we're seeing all of these kids now, a lot of them are not going to college. Our two are the two of those. But what we've said to them, and I never would have imagined that in my life. Like, I was always thinking, oh, and they're going to graduate from high school, and then they're going to go to college, and then they're going to go do this. And of course, everything has changed now with COVID. And, there are a lot of kids that are not going to college. But what we tried to tell them throughout all of our lives and their lives is just to go for what you're passionate about. And that's what I'm so proud of them for. They both are going for what they're passionate about, and it doesn't require a 4-year degree.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of judgment on that too. It's really interesting. So as a parent, it's fielding all of that. Oh, so Nat's not in school right now? No, she's doing other things. She's writing a graphic novel, which could change a lot of people's lives. Like, who
Yeah.
knows? It's just, she's doing what she's passionate about, and we're proud of that. So even from that standpoint, it's interesting just to have to throw away my own expectations of who they are.
I read because we unschool, but I don't know if you know that.
Yes.
And did you know that? Okay. I
Yeah.
never
Yeah,
know
it's
like
great.
who I tell or don't, or if I say it or
Mhm.
not. But anyway, there is a book the book that gave me even the idea, the
Mhm.
words for everything. But this specific author had said, I can't do the quote exactly, but he's like pretty much saying that our uh, is our picture or
Mhm.
belief of what our children will become is a
Mhm.
luxury um we don't have.
Right. Right.
It doesn't
Right.
belong to us.
It
It
doesn't.
belongs to them.
Mhm.
And it's he words it so much more beautifully than I did, but it doesn't belong to us.
It doesn't. No.
No.
But we don't know that. We're not necessarily taught that. Especially
No.
our generations. I think as we continue to move through time, these younger generations will get that more innately, like they do with everything. And even with transgender, um, the kids in high school are like, oh, yesterday you were Billy, today you're Amy. Sweet. Like, they're, at least in our pocket of the world,
Yeah.
there's an acceptance that is so beautiful, an innate knowledge, the soul knowledge that is where we're going, and that's a great thing. So
I know
yeah.
people give these generations coming up such a hard time, but I don't know what they're talking about, because I see some amazing, beautiful qualities of a generation that is not tied up
Yeah.
and carrying the amount of weight
Mm.
and expectation and judgment
Yeah.
that our generations do, including myself.
Yeah, me too. I hear you. I absolutely agree. And I just weirdly just said that to somebody yesterday. I'm like, I think, these generations are our hope. This is
Yeah.
such a beautiful thing to see the way that they interact. What's interesting too is, if I go backwards in time a little bit, when Nat was Noah and he was around 8, maybe, I was coming into, yeah, I was around 10 actually. I was coming into all of my um, mediumship abilities, and I would see things across the hall, in the kitchen, like everywhere, and it was kind of overwhelming. But I remember one day, and I will never forget this, because Noah walked in to go get a snack in the kitchen, and he walked past me, and I was at my desk, which was in the kitchen, and then immediately I saw this light being that was over kind of in the corner, and as Noah passed, the light being like showed reverence to Noah.
That's
I,
interesting.
yeah, very interesting, right? So I'd always held on to that. And, I've had other mediums and other people say, yeah, Nat is here to help you. Like, Nat's probably the oldest soul in your entire family. And there were times when I felt like she was looking at me like, oh, Mom, come on. Because I'm sort of the baby in all of this. And yet
Yeah.
she has this wisdom. And so for me to actually see that in a physical form and in a visual form was really, really potent. And then years
Yeah.
later, 10 years later, understand that she is on this journey. I thought, wow, yeah, absolutely. Reverence. I give reverence to her too.
Have you run into, I mean, I assume,
Mm-hmm.
have you run into, things that are really challenging you, pushing you up against, pertaining to the public, I say public, but like it really
Mm-hmm.
could be like family, friends, where it's really challenged you in staying, protecting your child is one, I don't know if protecting the child is necessarily as much as like having to stand up for her, having
Right.
to um, put people in their place or not put people in their place? Or
Mhm.
have you
Yeah,
had that challenge?
I have had that challenge. And, I've learned, I was a people pleaser for a long time, and that had to do with the abuse that I endured as a kid. And through everything that I have endured, I became much more vocal, and I became much more, I don't know, defiant in some ways. I'm sure some people would be like, ugh, would she just stop talking?
Yeah.
So I don't take any crap, and I also don't let anyone else off the hook. And I have compassion for people who it's truly just a learning thing and it's a learning curve, but it's those who are shaming in any way, then I will set them straight immediately. And that is, I would do that for myself. I would do that for my kids. I do that for, in general, for everybody. So in some ways that's no different from what I do in life, especially in working with and talking about narcissism and narcissistic abuse. And because the folks on that other side are extremely shaming. That's the tactic to make you feel really, really guilty. But yeah, so I'm constantly doing that, to a degree that I'm sure some people don't want me to.
Do you have a story or anything you want to share? Only because I think when other people see
Yeah.
an example of that, sometimes
Mhm.
they need somebody else's words
Yeah,
to
yeah.
get the confidence.
Right. So some of it is, and again, I have a lot of compassion for people. So even folks who were brought up extremely Christian, evangelical, very, very strong beliefs. I remember writing a blog post called Four Things That I've Learned as a Mom of a Transgender Daughter, a transgender adult, actually. And I got feedback from it. I got great feedback. I got a lot of support, but I also got a lot of comments and some private comments from people that said, it's not like, Kiersten, can you explain, thank you for trying to share. I'm still just not, I can't figure this out. They were very, very shaming and damning. And how could you as a parent support this is really what I was getting from them. How can you support Nat? This is wrong. And what I found is, I've, of course, would write back and say, I understand your viewpoint. Like, I understand why you feel that way, but let me tell you something. And from my standpoint, they know that I channel spirit. They know that I have this whole spiritual side. So I try, depending on their tone with me. I remember one woman was just very much like, this is so wrong. I can't believe that you and Scott are supporting Nat or Noah in this. Um, Basically, he's going to go to hell. And I said, that's not true. That's just not true. And
Yeah.
if you can't handle this and can't handle seeing this is not about you, right? This is about Noah and Nat. So I just said, we shouldn't be connected. Why should we be connected if this is something that you are going to constantly come at me with? And I think that was the second message I got from that particular person. So, it's a lot of fielding beliefs, I guess, belief systems, and trying to help people that just don't want to understand. They just simply want to word vomit on you what their
Yeah.
beliefs are.
Yeah. Thinking that it's going to
Exactly.
change yours when sitting here and you've had a whole different life experience than they have.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also too, let's be honest. When I don't know about you, but somebody shitting on me, I
Mm-hmm.
probably would take a little bit more like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
ouch.
Mm-hmm.
But you go to my kid,
Oh yeah.
like,
Exactly.
and the walls and everything's up.
Yeah. Oh
Don't
yeah.
get near them.
Mm-hmm.
Don't like
Mm-hmm.
it. It almost, those people doing that almost drives you. It does. It drives you closer to your
Right.
family and your kids. It drives
Ab-
you,
Absolutely.
and
And then
like,
yeah,
yeah, there's a fuel, right?
there's a fuel, and it's almost, I don't know, they jokingly call me, of course, Mama Bear, right? Oh, Mama Bear won again, because I'm very justice minded. And then you put that on top of what I know is right for my kids, and you're impeding that, and you're not helping them get, whatever it is they need, whether it is something related to school or whatnot, I just don't stop. I don't stop. And I'm almost a pit bull in that scenario. Cause so you're right. It's
Yeah.
in
They
terms
don't
of,
understand they're fueling it. They're giving you they're driving you closer to your sense of self,
yes, yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
which in a
Yeah.
weird sense of the word is better.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
And then
Well,
also too, I sit there and you're like, oh God, you're really playing with fire, at least in my own belief system. You're really
mhm.
playing with fire because you're going to get humbled in this.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Some
Absolutely. Mhm.
something in your life is going to show you this lesson
Mhm.
in some form.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, I know. Absolutely. And, we're in really tough times right now in terms of how much division there is, how,
Yes.
staunch views. And I even posted today about, all four of us are finally legally of age to vote. I have been for a long time, obviously, but Grace just turned 18, and then Nat's voting in this election too. So all four of us voted, and I said we voted for humanity, and we voted to protect, human rights and
Yeah.
LGBTQ rights. And I voted with fear as well. I voted with a lot of hope, but I voted with a lot of fear
Yeah.
that these protections will continue to get stripped from the LGBTQ world. And I guarantee you, when I look back at my phone, I'm going to have all kinds of messages coming at me, about it in a very negative way, I'm
Yeah.
sure. People want to tell you what they
Everybody's
think. Yeah,
everybody on both sides, everybody's out.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
we were talking before, and I'm about to go in.
I know.
I'm
Yes.
about to, I don't want any, not that I don't, I'm going to do my quote unquote fighting in a different way. Like
Yes.
this. Like,
Yeah.
I want to have a conversation, with a parent
Mm-hmm.
of a trans child. So
Mm-hmm.
we as parents can have those conversations
Mm-hmm.
and understanding that maybe people that are listening are too scared to have with somebody, or it's just not appropriate. You can't do it at lacrosse practice.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. I hope that people that are listening to this, will get something that maybe they were too afraid to ask, or like you said, it just wasn't the right
Yeah.
time, you know.
To bring it up on a higher note
Yes.
is, what have you connected with other parents, or met other trans children, or I don't know, just had like insight or conversations, anything in particular that just really just like lit you up?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, we're in a pocket of Arizona that is pretty liberal. It's Flagstaff, Arizona, and we're up at the mountains. Arizona as a whole, I think we're trending right now towards more democratic, but has traditionally been very red. Uh, in our little town, I know 5 transgender kids, and I know their parents. And what's nice about that is we can all just talk to each other about what we're feeling. And sometimes it's just really hard, and when you have a child on estrogen who is transitioning, that's a very emotional journey, and so even just being able to say, oh my gosh, I really didn't mean to piss off Nat today, but I totally did for whatever reason, and we'll just kind of go back and forth with our failures as
Yeah.
parents, and what we've said wrong and what we've done wrong, and how many times I say Noah versus Nat, and that type of thing. So a lot of it is just truly just been the camaraderie, and I know what you're going through, and I see you, and I see your amazing child, and how lucky we are to know each other.
I think that in general, just to know that
Yeah.
somebody, you hate to, there's a level of compassion that's learned from anything, right? Like just
Mhm.
general, like saying somebody who is in a car accident and is paralyzed has compassion for somebody even though they didn't lose a child. Like there is a compassion that can work in between, right?
Absolutely.
Once
Hmm.
again, doesn't mean a bad thing. It just is the way sometimes compassion is.
Yeah.
There is a level though of when you're going through, there's another degree, like
Right.
another level when you are going through something
Mhm.
similar,
Mm-hmm.
together, you
Right.
know?
Right.
That you and that another parent with a trans child can talk about the grieving process
Yeah. Yeah.
as a parent
Mm-hmm.
that another parent can't per se,
Right.
or talk about the amazing, like you realize, like you didn't realize the strength that your child had
Absolutely.
until this, like I knew you were strong,
Mm-hmm.
but now like it's hitting to like the soul, like just
Absolutely.
watching you
Yeah. Yeah.
and
And
how
how
much
much we've
conviction.
learned. Yeah. How much we've learned as parents and as adults by just watching both of my kids' bravery and everything that they've done. And yeah, we're kind of in awe of them for that. And I like to think, I agree. Like it's not our kids come through us, right?
Yeah.
They're not ours. They come through us. And obviously on the soul journey, they're here to experience their own soul journey. And some of that affects us and some of it doesn't. And so I'm very thankful as a medium that I have that basis of knowledge, and experience. I don't know everything. I only know what I know, but that's helped me tremendously to let go of expectations and just love these kids who picked me to be
Yeah.
their mom.
Okay, I had a question and it just floated out. um uh and I've had, this is interesting that I would have, but
Okay.
I've had a few parents ask me in
Mhm.
this situation, I'm not quite sure why me,
Okay.
because I don't have a trans child.
Right.
I think it's like they're new to the situation and they have
Oh, okay.
young ones that are bringing this forth that they are trans.
Hmm.
And different scenarios, we have parents that are divorced and one parent's definitely not supportive and the other one is like so supportive, they're going to supportive around and take that person to court, and there's all these different scenarios.
Hmm.
I I mean, I'm not sure. I know you guys were dealing with the depression and stuff like that, but it's like in the beginning, as in any parent for anything, is like you don't even know where to start.
Right.
Like your
Right.
child comes with you with this, and you don't even know where to start.
Right.
If if you had one like thing to recommend into how to start, I mean, it could
Okay.
be like find community, find a
Right.
forum,
Yeah. Yeah.
or
Um, I think, yes. I mean, I think that the natural first step for many parents is to Google the heck out of their computer, right? And look at, tons of stories and all of that. And I think it's a great thing to find community and to actually read about it. I would say find a psychologist who is trained in working with transgender people and transgender kids. Um, because they have this knowledge and they actually create the safe space for the entire family. And what was beautiful about it is we could constantly ask the psychologist in the very beginning, well, is this common? Like, did you deal with this? And,
yeah,
um, right before Nat came out as trans, she shaved her head. And I remember asking the psychologist, we're talking about that for a minute. And that was not like her to do. And she said, well, actually, it is pretty common because you just want to get rid of everything that is associated with who you are. And she hadn't come to us yet to say, I think I'm dealing with this. Maybe even on a subconscious level was just kind
yeah,
of getting rid of who she was as a guy, and of
yeah,
course as a female and wanting to grow your hair out longer, she has admitted that that backfired a bit, because then she went back. But it was just a moment of, I just want to get rid of all of this. I'm done with this mask of who I am. I want to be who I know I'm supposed to be. And we were able to get that information from the psychologist. So honestly, I say go to the people that have the training, that know. And typically there's at least one in every city. And we have one here who mostly only works with transgender young adults and kids.
I will add to this, was at least what I've found is
Yeah.
it is difficult to find somebody because oftentimes
Mm-hmm.
these doctors are inundated
Yes.
with
Mm-hmm.
with clients,
Right.
and that
Yeah.
in itself is difficult.
Mm-hmm.
uh but also too, like eye-opening. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I
Absolutely.
do, what I found interesting talking to a psychologist that I knew was it was more than just having a psychologist that was willing to listen to your side or may have some
Mhm.
experience,
Mhm.
but they could also discuss with you, um, like the medical side of it.
Yes.
And like you said before, like
Mhm.
things that are common in the processing of it,
Yes.
or the interactions with family, or in her case,
Mhm.
foster care, or
Right.
discussing with parents like what occurs
Yeah.
in that situation or what other people are going through. So
Absolutely.
it's much wider than
Mhm.
just let's discuss the difficulties of this. It's
Right.
the span.
Right. And what we found too, we have an amazing, or she has an amazing psychologist here in town. Was so helpful too to talk to her about, okay, do you know anyone here in town? It's a small town. Even though it's liberal, there's still a lot of folks that doctors will not want to deal with this. And do you know anyone who is prescribing hormones? And
Yeah.
so they have the network to help you navigate all of this without getting doors slammed in your face, without being shamed, knowing that and most importantly, your child is going to get the support that they need without having to jump through all of this negativity to get there. And
Yeah.
so that was really that was a beautiful thing too. um, we were lucky, we had other people in our lives who have transgender kids, so of course we reached out to them too. But I definitely think the psychologist was the key for us because she also had the network of community as well.
Don't be afraid to get rid of a psychologist if they do not work.
Exactly. Very true. Yes,
Another
exactly.
thing I would write on a poster board in a heartbeat and
Yes.
walk around the town with.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I remember when Nat was really little and she was 10 and we had tried everything. And she was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and was prescribed Zoloft. And I have no issue with medication. I think that it's absolutely needed in many cases. But this particular Zoloft did not work for her. And she felt really down. But I remember every single time we would go to this particular psychiatrist in Los Angeles, because we were living there at the time, I could see it. I mean, at the time, Noah would come out of those meetings and just be like, oh, God, I hate this guy. He could
Yeah.
see right through him. It was a 15-minute meeting. And basically, Noah would tell him what he wanted to hear. And the guy would be like, okay, here's
Yeah.
your, prescription. So yeah, get rid of them if they don't work. If your child sees through them,
Yeah.
that's the key. Listen to your
Your
kid.
kids aren't dumb.
No,
They're
they're
gonna
not.
get in and out of there. They're
No.
gonna
Yeah, so going through all of that process and finding the right person can take a little bit of time, but that's where I would start.
good. All
Yeah.
right. I know we've given a big portion of this, and I want to talk about your book. I know I've been reading it and I've been wanting to talk a bit about your book, and I'm not going to give stuff away because it's not published, but let's discuss a little bit about your book
I
and
would love
what it's
to.
about and how you feel writing it and so many things.
Well, first of all, thank you for reading it. I love that. And I was hoping that, when we first met, I just thought, I think you would really enjoy this. I think you would get a lot out of it. And I hope that that is the case as you're reading it. But the book is called Little Voices, and I have an agent who's currently shopping it right now. So I'm hoping that it'll come out next year or the year after. Publishing timeframes are so long; it's such a long wait. But the book was something that I was told early on that I would write, uh, and I was told that by a psychic medium that I didn't believe in psychic mediums at the time, and thought I have no idea what she's talking about. And then here I am writing this book. But the book is basically about my journey through coming into my intuition, but also using my intuition to heal from abuse that I suffered in the past. And it was childhood abuse that I suffered, childhood sexual abuse that I had repressed until I was 40 years old. So I started that intuitive journey with these kids coming to me who most of those children were abused or sexually in their lifetime, or abused and murdered by sexual predators. And I didn't understand it at first. like, I have no idea why all these kids are coming to me in spirit, but I'm going to do my best to help them. And then sure enough, I start seeing visions of myself between the ages of 3 and 6. And I was sexually abused and raped by my uncle. So the irony is, here these kids are coming to help me, or these kids are coming for me to help them, and they're actually helping me. And they even helped me through a relationship that I dove into, which ended up being completely abusive. And I pretty much just recreated the same type of person that my uncle is. And spent 3 years in this relationship before my husband Scott and I got back together. And those same children in spirit helped me climb out of that relationship. So intuition has been key for me, for healing, for guidance. I really feel like it's a roadmap if we listen. And I'm super grateful. Even though I had to go through a lot of hard stuff, I'm really grateful for what I've endured, because I think that, without it, I wouldn't be who I am, and I wouldn't have healed the way that I have.
It's like Maya Angelou. Did you
Yeah.
read I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings?
Yes. Yeah. A long time ago, but yes.
Yeah. And she
Yeah.
discusses that. I mean, she discussed that anyway, regardless of in the book.
Right.
How was it to write the book? Were you processed and far enough away from it that it didn't suck you in?
Yeah, no, that's such a good question. Thank you for asking that. I was not processed enough. I knew that it was time to write it. And it took me 3 years. I started in 2017. In the middle of this year was when I finally finished with the professional editing and all that jazz. So it took 3 years for me to write. In the very beginning, it was really difficult to write. The first part of the book is mostly my past, life and childhood, and you're getting an idea of how I came into all of this intuitive stuff. And I was on Shark Tank, won a deal. I had this whole entrepreneurial life that was completely in the spotlight, and all the intuitive stuff was happening behind the scenes. So you get all of that. The minute I got to the relationship that I had just climbed out of in 2017, I was in it from 2014 to 2017. That was really difficult to write. Very difficult to write. I'm so glad that I did, because each time I would go back and have to make revisions.
Yeah.
I felt like every single time I was getting higher and higher away from it. I was sort of finally looking at it from up here. I wasn't feeling it all viscerally. And I would find myself looking at it more as a writer than as someone who was writing it to heal. And I would say, oh, I need a little bit more description here. Or, oh, this isn't, capturing exactly how I was feeling. So I could look at it from that perspective. But yeah, I recommend writing through healing. I think it's an amazing journey, and I'm so glad I did. But I also remember the days where I dreaded it, and I wrote really fast just to get through it. And then I would have to go back and add a whole bunch of stuff. So that was my tactic. Just get it out and then go back and add.
Well, and I think Ann Patchett writes in The Getaway Car, is that when you write something, it's like pressing a butterfly down in a frame. It never actually embodies what the thing actually is. And that's what's difficult, especially I would assume, like with trying to explain spirit or intuition, trying to explain the depth in which that trauma changed you.
Yes.
And in anything, is like, if somebody went through a similar trauma, to read that and if you haven't processed or healed, like you can slip energetically down that channel and get lost.
Yeah.
And your spirit feels it. And I would assume with your writing it too, if you hadn't had done the work to not slip,
yes,
that would have been bad.
Yeah, I was in therapy with with a therapist and a psychologist for many months after I got out of the relationship, because I didn't understand it. I didn't know what had happened and how this perfect thing had then basically moved into a horribly abusive relationship with someone who turned out to ironically be a predator. So the full circle part of my life was just, smacked me in the face Like, how in the world did I fall in love with a predator when here I was, a childhood sexual abuse survivor, you know? So I had a lot of processing to do in therapy. And then as I started writing, I did notice I have memory issues because of the abuse. So it's easy for me to completely push away different moments. I noticed that as I was writing it, it was very channeled,
Yeah.
and things were coming in that I would forget. So I'm literally typing, and spirit is basically saying, you need to put this part in too. And then it would show me a
Gasping.
flash. Yeah. Yeah. I was like, oh, how in the world is that happening? But that happened quite a bit, where I would get a flash of a moment that I had completely forgotten about. And they're basically saying, put this in. Like, you know, we're showing this to you again so you can remember to talk about it. And there were moments that they would show me that I didn't realize where I was being abused, which is interesting, because some of that I didn't understand I was being abused. At the time, I just thought, oh, he's in a bad mood, and yet, you know, I was being gaslit. And so sometimes I'll be shown a moment so that I can go back and dissect, well, what was it about that moment that was abusive?
Well, it's
And
so interesting because your husband,
mm-hmm.
your relationship prior to that, and then now after, you know, because
Yeah,
he's sandwiches, you know,
yeah,
it's not like that.
no, not at
You
all.
know what I mean? So you would think like because it was such a stark
Yes,
difference
yeah,
that
yeah,
it would be obvious,
I know.
but no, because well, what I'm learning is that when you are dealing with the traumatized part of yourself, you're actually slipping into
Yep.
the traumatized part of yourself.
Yeah.
And so you're almost not the person.
Yes.
You're not in the spirit, or I don't even know if that's the self that
Mm-hmm.
is that it uh is most current
Right. Right.
or right before. So
Absolutely.
that's why you don't see it. It's very
Yeah.
odd.
Yep.
People are gonna think we're crazy. Like I'm explaining it, but
Yeah.
also to like the context of it. Like unless you've gone through it, like it just sounds on the level, on the surface
Yeah.
level. But no, it's like way deeper than that. It's
It's
literally being like Kiersten is in this, traumatic relationship.
Mhm.
In actuality, she has the brain of her 3 to 6 year old self
Yes.
as an adult.
Yes.
And
So
those are the memories she sees, and those are the interactions she's
mhm.
seeking out or in order to fix them. And
Yeah.
so the blinders are up.
Mhm.
And then once she can figure that out and see that that's occurring, then she can start the path to get out.
Absolutely.
But you had to get that tangle out.
Yeah. And it took a long time. And I went back and forth because, you know, when you're in that kind of relationship, there's also an addiction that is created, which I didn't understand, that I was chemically addicted to the highs and lows. And in that, you're just a constant roller coaster, and that becomes your normal state. So I remember it was probably 2.5 years in, and a friend of mine who's a medium, she was the first person, even before my therapist, who I was seeing a therapist at the time for the childhood sexual abuse, was not equating those two at all together. And she wasn't saying anything either, because I'm sure she knew, but I wasn't ready to hear it. But my medium friend said to me, little Kiersten's driving this bus.
Yeah.
And I remember finally when I got that, I could even feel it. I
Yeah.
could feel like when he would, there was a lot of breakups and getting back together. And when he was reeling me back in, I could actually feel it was like a drug. And I could identify that it was little Kiersten. The other thing that it was interesting that happened is, you know, my mind and my heart couldn't really process it all at the time, but my physical body did. So as a medium, I get a lot of physical sensations. On my right hip means one, or my right side means one thing, on the left side means another. If I get chills, I was starting to get this thumping kind of feeling on my right hip every time he would yell at me or shame me. And finally, I made the connection that was weirdly, little Kiersten's addicted to this, but also wants this to stop. So that was my way of associating, oh my God, this is what is happening. Like, this is little Kiersten screaming as well. So it was really fascinating because I was getting a lot more physical intuitive hits than I was anything that I would have seen, like through my regular mediumship work. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book. Here I am, this medium, right? I'm working with cops around the country and I'm helping families, and I get sucked down into this abyss with this
Yeah.
really, really dark person. It can happen to anybody.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons I wrote it.
Well, and I think there's just a misconception
Mhm.
that that mediums and I hate to say it, intuitives perpetuate this
Totally.
they perpetuate this misconception that
Mhm.
highly intuitive people are without that they can see the bigger picture all the time.
Right.
No, we
Mm-mm.
come in with, we come in with baggage
Yeah.
to work it out.
Yeah,
And
it's part of my life.
imperfections, yeah,
Yep. Mhm.
actually sometimes it's a whole lot bigger
Mhm.
than not than like the average Joe. That,
Right.
that's terrible to say, but it's big stuff.
It is big stuff. Yeah.
So I know I'm sitting, I sit here all the time. I'm like, I love my psychologist.
Uh-huh.
Love her.
Uh-huh.
Especially because she doesn't think I'm crazy.
Yeah.
But
Helpful. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
like, once again, get rid of them if they think you're crazy. Um, but yeah, like, it's important. If you are going down this intuitive path, you
Mhm.
are gonna have to deal with big shit.
Yep. Exactly. And I didn't realize, I now can look back, of course, and see the big picture of my life and what it is that I'm here to do. But it took a while, and even with the children coming in and talking to me, one of the kids who's been with me for a long time, his name's Jason. I don't know if you've gotten to that part in the book yet, but Jason was a teenager when he passed away, and he died of a heroin overdose. And so some of his messages while I was in the relationship, the first message was, "This is not what it seems. Kiersten, this is not what it seems." And I didn't want to believe it, but I just pushed it to the back of my head because I thought, well, this is great. I found this guy and it's amazing. And, we've started a company together, and it was, it was on paper looking perfect. And then the abuse started. And so by the end of it, Jason is the one saying to me, get a restraining order. Kiersten, this is your heroine. He is your heroine. So he was even equating it to his lifetime and having had that addiction, and in saying, you don't want this, you will die if you go down this road. And then by the very end of it, of course, I wish I would have known this in the very beginning, but that's not how it works. He said, you could not have avoided this. This was planned before your birth. This whole journey with him was planned before your birth. And now I understand that. I understand
Yeah.
soul contracts, and it helped me forgive. It helped me get to the point where I can look at it from a bigger view, from a plain view, and say, yeah, actually, I can see how all this fits together now. And I don't condone abuse. I don't think any of this is right. He was
No.
also abused as a kid. But if this was something I was meant to endure in order to heal and help others, then all I can be is grateful for it.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is you undoing the tangle.
Yep.
It needed to happen to undo the tangle. Also, too, this is an opportunity to stop trauma that keeps perpetuating itself through a family line.
Yeah, absolutely. And that
You know
is
what I
what
mean?
happened. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like you got heavily beat up because you stood and untangled the tangle that wasn't just yours,
Right. No, thank
and
you
you
for
didn't
saying.
perpetuate it.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't know that. I'm so glad you brought that up. A lot of people don't understand that connection and that energetic connection, the DNA connection with trauma, and how much it is perpetuated through those lines.
Right.
I am a cycle breaker. I know that. It's what I came in here to do. It was not easy, but I feel like I've done the job and created a space now where my kids should not go through that type of thing that I have been through, or if they'll recognize it really quickly, I'm just
Yeah.
grateful to be able to do that and to still be standing, honestly, and be able to be here and talk about it.
Yep. That's a whole other beating.
Yeah, yeah, it is for sure.
But you can't help it. I can't help it, and I'm going to do it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, it was really interesting too, because I remember when I met this guy, And of course I had an affair. I completely left my husband, although we had stuff going on, and he's fully aware of that and very much talks openly about how much he needed to grow and heal and how fast we both grew and healed. Even though it was 3 years, it still felt like it was no time at all. So we look back and we can't really remember when we were apart. It's kind of interesting. But yeah, so and then I lost my train of thought because that happens a lot with me too. But I think, in terms of looking at the whole picture, we both can see the whole picture. And he had gone to a medium. He went to a shaman in Sedona right when we split up, because I literally just said, oh, sorry, I'll go back. I know what I was about to say. So when I first met this guy that I fell down the rabbit hole with, I had chills from head to toe. I felt like I had known him forever, which, for me is a trauma bonded sign. It also could be a soul contract sign, right? That you know somebody at that level. But all of those signs, and even my friends were like, yeah, this looks great. Like, yes, I was leaving my marriage and that was not a good thing. And all of those things I was doing were wrong. And I regret that. But on, from an intuitive standpoint, everything looked like it was pointing me in that direction. And it was.
And it was. I was going to say, but it was.
Yes, it was for the reason for me to go through it and come out on the other side. But even with my husband, he went to see a shaman right before, or 2 months, I think, after we had split up, and I said I want a divorce. And we never got divorced. We were only separated. We never filed paperwork. We lived separately and the whole thing, but we never did that, which was kind of interesting. I think it's subconsciously we both had this hope that we would, come back together, and we did. But he went to see the shaman, and the shaman said, yes, there are things you need to fix. There's some codependency here that you need to work on. But this is primarily about Kiersten's healing journey, and it's going to take 2 to 3 years. Can you imagine being told that as someone who was still in love with his wife? And
I don't know how you.
Oh my God, right? He went out, he lived his life, dated other people, always was so kind to me and so loving. And, when I needed to hear it, he was saying, you can't live like this. Kiersten, if it's not me that you're supposed to be with the rest of your life, it just can't be him. So he was saying things like that to me to help me climb out. And I didn't, I leaned on him some. Yeah.
Yeah. You can't hear it.
No, I couldn't. And I kept getting sucked right back in, and he would ride that ride with me too, and just be there as a friend. And that's ultimately what led us back together. And he said, one of his life lessons is patience, which clearly it was, because, being told that it's going to take that long.
It seems like he won in the patience department.
He did win. Yes, he won. And I remember him even saying things to me like, he was dating a particular girl and for a little while, or woman, and she finally said to him, "You're still in love with your wife." And that's sort of what ended that. But, I think he was very open. He was like, if somebody came along that I felt that, connection and that love for, like I do for Kiersten, I would have absolutely dove in head first. But that wasn't what was meant to be for us. What was meant to be for us was for us to get back together. Yeah.
I'm glad that. Aren't you so glad to be on you're so glad to be on the other side of it, but
yeah,
the gift of understanding it.
Yeah, the gift of understanding it and seeing that pattern happen in so many other people's lives, and being able to write about it and talk about it. I've had, hundreds and hundreds of people write to me and say, thank you so much for talking about this, because this is exactly the same pattern that I have endured. I had no idea that I suspected I was abused as a kid, but when you don't have that conscious knowledge that you were abused, you don't understand how your subconscious, which drives 80% of our behavior, is affecting your life. And so, there are a lot of things that I'm hopeful that people will understand, and just in general, that intuition is real, and you don't have to be woo-woo. You can be a normal person and absolutely wholeheartedly embrace it.
Thank you so much for doing this with me. And how can, I don't know if we did it last time, but how can my listeners find you?
Thank you for asking that. So I'm in 2 places, but the more personal side, and the side where I talk about spirit and abuse, would be KierstenParsons.com. And it's KIERSTEN Parsons.com. And then my furniture line is modmomfurniture.com, but I have a lot of links to some of the personal stuff there too. So I don't keep them separate anymore. I've blended both because that's who I am.
Yeah.
And I've had to learn to do that and, step through the fear to do that.
I'm so glad that you did. Thank you so much for doing this with
Thank
me.
you so much for having me on today.
We'll talk soon.
All right, sounds good. Thanks.